we'll go on and get things started. I'd like to welcome Eric Frankl from the Bluegrass Airport. They're going to clap for you. It's on.
Thank
you. Need to take it out. You can.
All right, no, that's fine. Thank you. And thanks for having me back. I can't remember. I think it's been a little bit over a year since we spoke once before, but I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to this group. And first of all, I like groups this size are a little more interactive. And second of all, we don't want everyone to lose track that while the airport's located in Fayette County, it really serves a greater region, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. But the other good thing is there's a couple of things that we're going to talk to you about today that no one knows yet. It's not air service related, but there's some other good developments that you're going to be the first to hear about. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Most of you are familiar with the airport, I presume, but we always go through these first couple of slides just not making any assumptions. This airport serves about 1 million passengers a year from our region, not just from Lexington. It serves a pretty significant region, which you can see right there. And actually the lower slide I think shows it a little bit better, just how far to the east and to the south our region serves. These are inexact science, but it's really important, I think, for our airport, our region, to know that, because a lot of people in these areas, we are their closest airport, and we serve a region. So certainly we're sensitive to Lexington and the needs of Lexington, but we really try to look outside that as well. The airport is this unique entity and not all that well understood, but it's almost like a separate government. We're really a separate operating entity, governmental entity. The mayor does appoint 10 board members, but outside of that, we operate independently. So we don't receive any taxpayer dollars. We're completely self-funded, and I think it's worth knowing that, because over the years, I think it does get confused, or people think that we're part of the city, and certainly we have a good relationship with the city and county and the surrounding counties, but we're really a separate entity. All right, so I'm going to just get right into the industry. That's the airlines are what people typically care more about than the airport, but we're going to talk about both today. And some of you may remember this if you went to my speech a year or so ago, so I'm going to kind of get everybody up to speed on where the airline industry is. This merger may have been the most painful one for us, because we used to have AirTran, and I know you all are familiar with Southwest. We thought when Southwest acquired AirTran that we would, for the first time, have access to the Southwest product, if you will, and they basically felt differently. And so we were one of, actually about half of the AirTran communities that got eliminated after this merger, and that was unfortunate for lots of reasons, but it's also a reflection on the industry. The more these mergers occur, the less competitive you'll see not only our airport, but most airports, and you're going to see that here graphically in a second. And of course, this is the other big one just going on right now, and that's American Airlines and US Air merging. American Airlines went into bankruptcy, and they're going to come out, and those two entities are going to merge. Right now, American Airlines serves Dallas and Chicago from Lexington, and US Air serves Charlotte. We expect that those three are going to remain, but we don't know, and hopefully that's the case. But after this merger, which we think, to the best of our knowledge, may be the last one for a while, we have this graphic, and this graphic is kind of hard to read, but for those of you that have kind of paid attention to aviation over the years, on the right side, on your left side, those are the airlines that existed in 1978, the time the industry was deregulated. And then you can see the middle column, as of 1990, the airlines that have either went bankrupt or merged, then in 2000, and then today. And you can get a pretty good glimpse. You'll probably recognize some of those names of those airlines that no longer exist, and those four airlines are really the ones remaining. What you don't see is Allegiant in this case, because Allegiant isn't classified as your typical network airline, and obviously our airport will be left with the Delta, United, American, and Allegiant instead of Southwest. But most airports are going to have these four or five basic carriers. There's only 3 or 4 airlines that are left that don't serve this market, and probably will likely not serve this market. JetBlue, you've heard that name. They serve East Coast and West Coast, they're big communities. Virgin America is on the West Coast. Spirit Airlines is a kind of like an Allegiant carrier. Of course, Alaska Airlines, Hawaiian Airlines, it's not likely they're coming to Lexington, pretty sure about that. But, we talked to all the airlines. We talked to certainly our existing airlines, and we also talked to those remaining airlines. But we think this complement of airlines is probably what we're going to have for the foreseeable future. And while this shows sort of the industry on a national scale, you can see how it affects us. So that top pie chart is 2009. That's how our traffic got distributed. So we have 1 million passengers, and it got distributed roughly in those percentages. The top graph was in 2009. It was just after Northwest and Delta merged. So it looks like Delta obviously does have a big portion of the pie, but that's because that was just after the Northwest merger. And of course, with Northwest, you would have saw 7 airlines. This year you'll see 5, and as of next year, you're far right, it will be down to 4 airlines, and the percentages. And I would say it's a little concerning or distressing to a lot of us in the industry. I would say that Lexington really is blessed. This region really is blessed with the service that we'll have remaining, because there are a lot of regions that don't have the population that we have that are going to end up with a lot less. After these mergers happen, everyone knows that Cincinnati was really no longer operating as a hub. Now Memphis no longer operates as a hub. St. Louis, Pittsburgh, you can go on and on. Well, communities that had service to those cities, that might have been their only service, and they don't even have that now. So we're very blessed, but you can tell just by looking at the pie just how this changed over the last 5 years. That's our route map. You can get direct service to those cities, and obviously you can get to anywhere in the world from those cities. So we are really one stop to the rest of the world, particularly through Atlanta, Detroit, Chicago, a lot of those hubs. We really have, I think this is 14 cities, is that right? 14, service to 14 direct service. Low fares to the Florida cities, as many of you know, with Allegiant, which we're really happy to have. It balances out. But we're geographically located in a very good place that makes this viable for us. This chart we just throw on there, and again, if we look at where we are, and some people think, are we growing, are we not, or should we grow, should we expect to grow in the future? These red bars that you see are the population of Fayette County and the surrounding counties. And it goes through those years, 1980, 90, 2000, and 2010. The blue bar is what our one-way passengers reflects. So you can see how much it correlates really with the population of the region. Again, a very inexact science, but it gives you a feel. We're certainly going to go out there and try to attract more service. That's our job, and that's what we'll do. But are we going to see significant growth? Probably not, I'd say. This gentleman's a big consultant in our industry, very controversial consultant in our industry to some degree. But I think we grabbed this statement because I think this says it all. Normally, I would have come to this meeting or any other ones like it every year, and we would have talked about this airline that we're chasing or that airline or what the growth is. But the industry's really matured now. And in our country, the industry's matured. And so whatever changes that we make in the future are probably not going to be as dramatic. Certainly, we're going to try to add new airlines, and we're also going to try with our existing airlines to add service or new routes with them. But this sort of says it all. Now, before I go on, we're going to get to the interactive portion of our program. You guys didn't know that, I know. But in fact, I didn't know until I was driving over here. But if I asked, I'm just curious. Well, first of all, by show of hands, how many people fly out once a year? 5 times a year? 10 times a year? Okay, so, good mix. At least everybody flies pretty regularly. If you had to guess, I'm just looking to shout out numbers here. If you had to guess how many passengers we lose to Cincinnati and Louisville combined, a percentage number. So in this region, how much percentage do you think that we lose to those 2 other airports? Guesses? 20? What is it? 5? I should be so lucky. 20? 15? 40? 47%. And it's almost equal. It's almost equal between Cincinnati, about 22% to Cincinnati, 25% to Louisville, or vice versa. Southwest is a great airline with a great product, but they don't have as low of fares as what they've been known for. And so we lose less to Southwest. Where we really lose traffic is to destinations that those communities serve directly that we don't. It's really not as much fare driven anymore. Certainly there's good fares at all those airports and we'll lose some, but the main reason we lose is really because of direct service. Now, interestingly enough, and we're going to talk about this a little later, we've been doing a kind of a history of the airport in this region, and during that research, we found one of my colleagues said almost 50 years ago, and look at that percentage. We lost 55% back in 1966 to those two airports too. And my predecessor, Logan Gray, was sort of complaining about it. We got to do something about it. We got to do something about it. Well, it just shows you that over 50 years, that trend, that demographic, doesn't change much. We can make improvements here or there, but by and large, it's really where those direct service are. It's really where we're going to be challenged to improve. That said, again, I think this region, at least from the industry perspective, is very well served for a population in our region. All right, so let's talk about what we're doing now. To give you some context, as many of you know, last time we spoke, we had the World Equestrian Games going on. We had made a lot of improvements to the terminal. We had a second runway built. Those are good and kind of past us now. And then this last year, we worked on a master plan for the airport, and I suspect that most people didn't even know that was going on. We had public hearings, we had public information meetings, but the reason I suspect no one knew what was going on is because we weren't doing anything, we weren't proposing anything controversial. We weren't proposing any runways or extending any runways or doing anything, and obviously, to the extent that's the case, people probably got bigger fish to fry than the airport. But we are making some changes to the airport I thought you might be interested in. We're going to talk about those today. One, if you're a general aviation pilot, we built that second runway that runs parallel, right across from Keelan, runs parallel to Versailles. And we're going to be now building some hangars, some private hangars for private individuals, small aircraft owners, and really try to meet that demand. And we all think of the airport in terms of commercial service, and that is the big component of what we do. But there's a lot of private aviation that gets supported out of for this entire region that people have aircraft for. This is probably our biggest project, and it's hard to really see and know unless you work at the airport, because some of these improvements are really internal to the airport. So I suspect that unless you work at the airport, no one will be affected, and no one, honestly, will really care. But I think it's really good for our community in this respect. These improvements that you see, which is this black line, is really going to be a realignment of our taxiway system, which is going to cause us to move our firefighting station, which is going to cause us to move our maintenance complex. And all combined, we think we're going to be investing in the airport about 40 to 45 million in the next 5 to 7 years. That's a big number, a big construction number for our region, and it'll go on quietly probably, but it's really important for our community. This will be the last kind of steps for the airport. The airport will be in good shape, physical, infrastructure-wise, but these will be some of the things that people don't see that really do make a big difference. Dunkin' Donuts, this is the first announcement today. It's coming in the terminal. For those of you that couldn't find coffee or didn't like the coffee we had, Dunkin' Donuts is going to be on the other side of security, right as you get up the escalator, and it'll be a full restaurant, Dunkin' Donuts. So we think that's going to be very excited. That's probably one of our biggest issues that we have, is people are not really happy with the coffee selection. So I don't drink coffee, but I understand they're good, so excellent. Big thumbs up. A Mexican grill. Now, for those of you who have been in the terminal, there is a coffee location down our Concourse B, which is in the Delta area. Now that Dunkin's going to relocate their operation, that space will be available. We're going to actually have a Mexican restaurant. That will be a full-service restaurant throughout the day as well. So between the sit-down restaurant that exists there now, an All-Tex brewery-type restaurant, the Dunkin' Donuts in this facility, we think we'll have some good options for the passengers. The video wall, if you haven't been out at the airport lately, and many of you may not necessarily advertise at the airport, but these are new high-tech technology video walls that advertisers use to promote their product and promote the region when new people come to Lexington. Those just started last, I guess, a couple of months ago, 2 or 3 months ago. So. And I think you'll see that's in one of the brochures if you're interested. It's in the packet at your table as well. we have meeting space, and we've just basically went through a renovation. So this happens a lot more than you think. People fly in and they want to have a meeting out there because the person's flying back out, and or it's a good location to meet people. And if anybody ever needs a space to have a small office or a larger conference room, we have those facilities now, if it makes sense for you. Electronic boarding passes, again, for those people who travel a lot, this is kind of a cool item for those who have an iPhone or any type of technology, modern phone today, I'd say. You can get your boarding pass on the phone itself, so you don't even have to go to the counter. If you're not checking a bag, you don't even have to go to the counter. You just can download their app and go right to the security checkpoint area. And finally, our new initiative, which we've been working on for a couple of years, and kind of on and off, and it certainly hasn't been our number one priority, but what we're really going to be proud of is we've done a history of the airport in this county, in this area, going all the way back to the beginning of aviation. And this, we hope, will be ready in come the winter, perhaps by Christmas if we're lucky. It's a really, really interesting book. So before I go on, though, I'm just going to show you a couple of slides. But before I do that, does anybody know how many airports we have had in this region, or at least in Fayette County? You know it's more than one, or I wouldn't be asking the question, right? Well, interestingly enough, we've had 3. And it's the more you look into this, I think the more interesting you'll find of where they were located and why they were located there. And particularly Glengarry or Cool Meadows, which is where Fasig-Tipton is right now. That would have been a good location for an airport, by and large, and it probably was, but it never really grew very well. And then obviously during the war years, our current airport is built in its current location. But even in the 1920s, Holly Field, which is obviously now a residential development, was a really interesting how that ended up being there. And there's some really good stories. We've got a lot of photos during all those earlier years up till today. Some of you may remember this building. In fact, who remembers this building? You're probably going to date yourself, but I'm kind of curious. 4 or 5? Obviously, this building doesn't exist anymore. It's where our terminal's sitting on top of it, but this was the original terminal building, and it was very small at that point in time. Even for the amount of traffic, it was very small right from the beginning. So it didn't last long. I guess 25 years or so before we moved on. And of course, some of you remember that baggage area used to be outside the terminal. And in 1946, our first commercial airline, which was Delta. And Delta, as you go back to that first, is the only one that's made it this entire time of the original airlines. And we've had a ton of VIPs, and we've documented a lot of that. And I think you'll find it very interesting, the politicians and stars and people that have flown through this airport and why they were here. And it's just some very interesting stories. In addition to, there's a whole chapter on moving horses as well that I think you'll find interesting, how they're done, how they're moved, the history of horses flying, and the different horses that have flown through our airport. So with that, I just want to share that information with you today, and hopefully you'll hear more about that when we get closer to launching that book. So, but this is always a good time too to talk about what anything anybody wants to talk about, whether it's the airlines, the airport, how we're governed, how we operate, anything you want to know. I know we're going to be running short on time, but I'd love to answer any questions anybody has. The question was how long the Taxiway Enhancement program is going to go, and we hope to start actually this fall, but it'll probably be a 5-year program to do all that, and it's going to be an intensive effort on our part to move all those facilities and realign, and again, $40 to $45 million. It'll be great for our community. Other thoughts, questions, curiosities? You're going to learn a lot when you see this history book. I think people will like that. Everything you wanted to know and didn't want to ask. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.